of our members on the Hill, mostly doing federal policy, but some state policy too. And I'm joined by Jeff John Roberts from Fortune.
I'm Fortune crypto editor. East Denver's a shit show as usual, so thanks for your patience, but that's all part of the fun. I guess let's just go right into it. Gary Gensler, have you guys heard of Gary Gensler? You probably have. My take on it is there's a bit of a policy and regulatory vacuum in Washington, D.C. So you've got this guy named Gary Gensler, who is Hillary Clinton's bagman. He's very ambitious. He wants to be Treasury Secretary, and he's kind of out to nuke crypto. That's kind of a simplification. Obviously, some things happened. FTX not good and so on. But I'm going to go to Marisa, who's a policy DC expert, and just please tell us what is up with Gary Gensler.
So how many of you know who Gary Gensler is? Okay, cool. Gary Gensler is the chair of the SEC, and he has a pattern of regulating the industry by enforcement. So I'm sure you guys have seen many of the headlines lately or some of his fun videos that he likes to put out. Okay. But his role is basically to regulate the securities industry. And with crypto, some assets could be classified as securities while others could not be. But instead of making some sort of rulemaking or guidance, he's just decided that they're all securities. And he's been doing that through the court system. So it's interesting. We are actively engaged in staying up to date. We, meaning the Blockchain Association, has written an amicus brief in the Ripple lawsuit, and then also in Grayscale, and most recently in the Wahi case, which is the most, in my view, egregious example of how the SEC is regulating by enforcement. They've named 9 token creators in that lawsuit, but not named them as defendants in the lawsuit. So those token creators have no opportunity to be heard on the issue.
Marisa, is that the Tornado Cash case?
That's the Wahi case. So it's the case that is, it's an insider trading case, one former Coinbase employee, and 2 other individuals. But the Tornado Cash one is also very interesting.
Yeah, and this is sort of what's going on, is that he's sort of at the side saying, assuming there are securities, but no court has said what's a security. It's clear Bitcoin is not a security. Ethereum, the SEC earlier said, is not, but now it seems like Gensler is trying to pull everything and define it as a security, even stablecoins. And I'm a former lawyer myself, and I just don't understand the stablecoin thing. How you make a profit off stablecoins, I don't get it. But is that sort of what's going on?
Yeah, it's interesting too, because the SEC as an agency, they have a duty before they make rules. They have to go through a public notice and comment procedure where the public has an opportunity to engage with the agency, and they just aren't doing that. So they issued guidance regarding ICOs 4 years ago, I think it was. And since then, they've been completely silent. So it seems like now, especially with stablecoins, they're just trying to grab as much jurisdiction as they can. And oftentimes these cases end in settlement. So it's a court basically like rubber stamps the settlement. It's not precedential in a sense, but the SEC is like outlining these rules without going through the lawful process.
Yeah, and I want to get to Tornado Cash in a sec, but just politically in Washington, what's going on? It seems strangely that crypto is now a partisan issue, which I think is kind of unfortunate. It seems the Republicans are more in favor of giving crypto more space to breathe, and the Democrats are trying to curtail it. But I even know some progressive Democrats are in favor of crypto because it promotes financial inclusion. But is that how it's shaping up? And is crypto now more of a Republican-Democrat thing than it used to be?
I think that it's still bipartisan, but there's also just the general partisanship of Washington, and I think that is being mirrored in all different industries, not just crypto. But there are some really great advocates on both sides. But, to highlight on the Democrat side, there are some, so it's not just Republicans. And we, like at the Blockchain Association, are actively working on educating new members of Congress since it just switched. So.
Yeah, no, I see that too, and I'm optimistic long term, but obviously short term it's perilous. But I mean, I guess what advice, we might have some builders or devs or founders out here, like, what can they do or not do? Like, what should they be careful of?
Like in terms of what they're building?
Yeah, suppose you're building a decentralized platform, like Tornado Cash.
Right.
To what degree are you going to be exposed to, the SEC or even criminal law for throwing a piece of open source code out there?
Yeah, well, I have to give my little disclaimer first. I am a lawyer, but not your lawyer. I think decentralization is a key thing to pay attention to. I also think it's very important to have good advisors and lawyers on your team who you can ask these tough questions to, because it's so fact dependent and product dependent. So I wouldn't say there's one or a suite of advice that would apply to everything, but stay optimistic and hopeful. I know the landscape right now in the United States seems a little bleak, but I have hope, and there are people in Washington who are working on your behalf to make sure that the regulatory landscape continues to foster innovation. But keep building, that's what I would say.
And where do you look to for resources, though, too? Because I know on crypto Twitter, you can say what you want the law to be, but the law is what the law is. And, you're from, white shoe law firm practice, where I know hourly rates can be north of $1,000 an hour. And if you're a startup, that's probably beyond your means. What are good sort of sites or resources to look for legal guidance on crypto?
Yeah, there are some great lawyers to follow on crypto. I mean, you can follow me, but I follow most of the great lawyers in the industry. So if you're Jake Travinsky, who's our chief policy officer, he has some great summaries, just case summaries. There's also an account called Law Toshi, and he's created a open source database of cases and case summaries, which I just think is really cool, and very falls in line with the sentiment of our industry generally. But it's also good to stay up to date with media articles. I mean, Jeff writes some great articles, so definitely follow his work. And Jake Travinsky, but Jeff, this is Jeff. But
Jeff is great too.
Jeff is awesome, so follow Jeff's work too.
I know the title of this panel is A Road to the Supreme Court, and obviously the Supreme Court lays down the law and stuff. However, to get a typical case to the Supreme Court takes 5 years, or typically. And the leading cases out there I see right now are Ripple versus SEC, and what's the security and what's not. Super interesting. Likewise, Grayscale, love them or hate them, they have this interesting thing of trying to get an ETF. And then, of course, there's the Tornado Cash stuff, which I promise we'll talk about. But what is the problem is there's no law out there saying what a security is. So which case should you be watching most closely, and when are the courts going to start giving us an answer?
Yeah, I mean, Ripple is through the summary judgment phase, which is the final stage before a trial, and the judge has to rule on it. So the judge has not ruled yet, but that one might be the first that we see a substantive ruling on. But it's possible that one goes to the Supreme Court. It's possible Grayscale goes to the Supreme Court. I think right now the Supreme Court, the justices on the Supreme Court are less likely to defer to agencies, which means they're more likely to take power away from agencies. We saw that in an entirely different context in the EPA-related case. But regardless of what your politics are or views on environmental issues, which was the issue in that case, I think the theme is that the justices are more likely to take power away from the agencies, which could be positive in our case when the SEC is really overstepping its authority.
Yeah, I mean, for nerds like us who watch this stuff closely, it doesn't matter what your politics are. It's how much power should an agency have? The SEC is obviously not the only agency. There's, the FCC and the CFTC and all these things. And I think, some conservative jurists are like, these agencies have too much power because Congress is the one who's supposed to say what the rules are. These things aren't accountable. So, and, whatever you think of the merits, the truth is the Supreme Court has said, no, we're going to put you on a way shorter leash, agencies, including possibly you, Gary Gensler. But, who knows really what judge you get and how long this is going to take. But finally, let's go to Tornado Cash, which I find a fascinating case because the broad strokes are, this was, a mixer. They probably don't want us to call it that, but, where you could put your Ethereum into, get different Ethereum out of, and it's open source code. And if I go and host that code, am I liable? Or just break down the legal issues of Tornado Cash for us, please.
Yeah, sure. So that one is a really good example of an agency overstepping its authority. So OFAC, which is the agency or the Department of the Treasury that sanctions persons and property, and they only are able to sanction persons or property. So the issue with Tornado Cash is that Tornado Cash is a software, and this is the first time that they've placed sanctions on a software. And that means that if any U.S. person interacts with the software, and as you guys probably know, somebody can send an asset to your wallet and you don't have an opportunity to reject the person sending it. It just appears in your wallet. So that would constitute interacting with the software, which would mean that you're violating sanctions, which is a crime in this country. So the implications are huge. And there are 2 lawsuits going on right now that were filed last fall. One is being funded by Coinbase, and then the other one is a Coin Center lawsuit. So we're closely following those. But it raises some really interesting legal issues. The one I find most interesting is the First Amendment issue, which is the freedom of speech, freedom to freely associate. And that freedom to freely associate is the key part of the case here. If somebody wanted to send funds anonymously to Ukraine to help with the Ukrainian relief, and they didn't want Putin to know about it, they could use Tornado Cash to disguise the source of their funds.
Yeah, but this doesn't seem like a new thing, like Tor software. I'm old, so I remember the idea of swapping music files using a protocol, and that was, people saying it's illegal. But, at some point like this, Tornado Cash isn't the first example of open source peer-to-peer software, right? So is there any precedent or guidance what might happen?
No, I think it's totally illegal for them to sanction open source software. Theoretically, you could think about this could mean that if they are allowed to do this, they could sanction something like HTTPS, which would be crazy, to not be able to interact with that. We wouldn't be able to use the internet. There's probably better analogies I can make, but that's just the one that came to the front of my mind. But I don't think that it's legal what they're doing. I hope that the cases turn out in that way. They're filed in jurisdictions that are less likely to defer to agencies, so I do have hope. And, it's up to the parties to write briefs that explain these issues in a simple way that's easily understood by a judge who most likely is not familiar at all with crypto.
And just finally, forgive me, we're a bit short on time because we got started late, but, for people who want to get involved in this, I don't think, anyone here is, able to go dash before the Supreme Court, but if you want to sort of get involved in some ways, you're interested, you want to support one of these lawsuits either financially or with your work, or just kind of, contribute, what are the options available to, people in the crypto community who want to, care about this and, have an idea about what's at stake legally and to contribute to it? I know that's kind of a funny question, but,
yeah.
If you're not super insider DC person, and part of the Supreme Court bar, what does an ordinary person do?
I would follow Coin Center's work. If you're not familiar with them, they're an amazing organization. You can donate to them if you are so inclined, but they work on a lot of the core constitutional issues that impact our industry. They're the ones that filed this Tornado Cash lawsuit, so do whatever you can to support them. They also write some incredible thought pieces that really break down the legal issues in an easily understood way. So that would probably be my best advice.
Yeah, and I'll just second that. Coin Center, I know the people there. They're sort of good, hardworking people. Likewise, Blockchain Association. And while it's kind of dark days with what's going on out there, I've been doing this for 10 years. I can't believe how far crypto's come. Before 10 years ago, they'd be lucky to find one senator who could define Bitcoin. Now you've got a layer of sort of sophistication there. And I know crypto's out of California and borderless, but the reality is power is power. And I think having organizations like the Blockchain Association and Coin Center translating it to our political leaders, Washington, D.C. is, like, in terms of technology, one of the slowest places because it's run by a bunch of 70 and 80-year-olds who, might or might not use email, but that's changing. So, please give a shout out to Marisa for fighting the good fight, and come find us on Talk, and then follow all the good lawyers on crypto Twitter. So thank you very much.
Thank you.